Every year, thousands of Americans head into the woods absolutely convinced they know exactly what to do, and end up getting airlifted out because they peed on a jellyfish, ate a cactus like a smoothie, or tried to outrun a bear by zigzagging like a drunk toddler. If you've ever nodded along to any survival tip you saw in a camping Facebook group, smash that like button right now because you are exactly who this video is for. And by the end, you'll realize you've been confidently wrong about almost everything outdoors your entire life. 1. Moss grows on the north side of trees, and if you follow it, you will never get lost in the woods. Sounds like a genius ancient survival trick passed down through generations of very confident and very lost people. The truth is, moss grows wherever it is wet and shady, which in a dense forest is basically everywhere on every tree in every direction simultaneously. This myth has turned more hikers into human spinning tops than any other piece of bad advice in outdoor history. 2. If a squirrel ate a mushroom, then that mushroom is completely safe for humans to eat? An absolutely spectacular logic that somehow became a legitimate survival tip people actually repeat with full confidence around campfires. Squirrels have digestive systems built like chemical processing plants that laugh at toxins that would send a human straight to the emergency room. Death cap mushrooms that can shut down a human liver in 48 hours are basically a light snack for a squirrel who will forget about it immediately and move on with his day. 3. Peeing on a jellyfish sting is one of those survival tips that spread so fast and so confidently that people genuinely believe doctors invented it. The reality is urine actually triggers the unfired stingers still sitting in the skin to release even more venom, making the whole situation dramatically worse than before. This myth did not come from any medical professional ever. It came from people who wanted a funny story and accidentally turned it into dangerous mainstream advice that beaches around the world are still trying to kill off. 4. Cactus water is the ultimate desert survival hack. Crack one open and drink your way back to safety like a real wilderness legend. Raw cactus pulp is so acidic and loaded with alkaloids that it causes violent vomiting and diarrhea almost immediately, which in a desert survival situation is the fastest possible way to accelerate dehydration and make everything 10 times worse. The cactus did not store that water for you. It stored it for itself, and it booby-trapped it just enough to make sure you deeply regret the decision. 5. Playing dead when a mountain lion attacks is the move. Same logic as bears, same result, right? Just go limp and survive the day. Mountain lions are ambush predators, hardwired to chase, catch, and eat things that stop moving. So lying still is essentially sending them a dinner invitation with your body as the main course. This myth works perfectly for black bears and gets people hurt by mountain lions, and the two animals never agreed on a universal survival policy. 6. Quicksand was basically the #1 Hollywood killer for decades. Every jungle movie, every adventure show, every dramatic scene had someone slowly sinking to their doom in a pit of wet sand. Real quicksand reaches about waist depth and then stops because of basic physics. And the actual danger is just being stuck in place until something worse happens nearby. Hollywood invented a monster, and an entire generation grew up practicing their quicksand escape plan for a threat that barely exists in real life. 7. Laying completely flat on the ground when lightning is about to strike sounds logical because you are making yourself the smallest possible target and getting low, which feels very smart in a terrifying moment. Lying flat actually maximizes your body surface area against the ground and allows electrical current from a nearby strike to travel through the soil and straight through your entire body from head to toe. The correct move is to crouch low on the balls of your feet, and the ground itself becomes the enemy the moment lightning enters the picture. 8. Rubbing 2 sticks together to start a fire is the most universal survival skill in every movie, every show, and every conversation about wilderness survival since the beginning of time. Actual friction fire requires a very specific wood combination, a precise technique, bone-dry materials, and the kind of forearm endurance that most people do not possess after a comfortable life of using lighters. Survival instructors who teach this method professionally describe watching beginners attempt it as one of the most humbling and occasionally hilarious experiences in outdoor education. 9. Avoiding a tourniquet because it will cost you the limb is one of those myths that sounds medically responsible and cautious, but has actually caused more limb losses than tourniquets ever have in documented history. Tourniquets, applied correctly, within the first few minutes of severe bleeding, save limbs and lives, and the hesitation caused by this myth has turned survivable injuries into unsurvivable ones in real emergency situations. The myth somehow convinced people that waiting and hoping was the medically superior option over the tool that military medics use without a second thought. 10. Eating snow when you are thirsty and surrounded by. It sounds like the most obvious and freely available hydration solution nature could possibly offer a stranded person. Your body has to burn a massive number of calories, converting that snow to liquid internally, which accelerates hypothermia, and the calorie burn actually leaves you more dehydrated and colder than before you started snacking. Snow is basically a beautiful frozen trap that looks like free water and is technically free water, but charges you everything else you have left just to process it. 11. Zigzagging to outrun a bear is one of those survival tips that sounds athletically clever, like you are going to outmaneuver a wild animal with your superior human lateral movement skills. Bears can hit 35 miles per hour in a straight line and turn sharper than any panicking human who just remembered this tip from a YouTube video 3 years ago. The zigzag myth has absolutely zero scientific basis, and the only thing it reliably produces is a more exhausted person who is still being chased by the exact same bear. 12. Sucking venom out of a snake bite is so deeply embedded in survival culture that people have been doing it confidently for over a century, while doctors have been screaming into the void trying to stop them. Venom enters the bloodstream within seconds of the bite, making the sucking completely useless, while simultaneously introducing mouth bacteria directly into an open wound and making the infection situation dramatically worse. Every emergency physician who has treated snakebite victims describes the suck the venom attempt as a bonus injury the patient gave themselves on top of the original one. 13. Walking downhill when lost is the universal survival instinct because water flows downhill and civilization follows water, and this logic sounds so clean and reasonable that it has been repeated forever. Downhill in real wilderness terrain leads directly into impassable gorges, swamps, dense river bottoms, and canyon systems that trap people far more effectively than staying put ever would have. The forest does not care about your very reasonable logic, and it has a whole collection of dead ends waiting specifically for people who were absolutely certain downhill was the right call. 14. Building the biggest possible signal fire seems like the most obvious move when you need rescuers to spot you from the air, because more fire equals more visible, and more visible equals more rescued. The 2002 Hayman Fire in Colorado, which became the largest wildfire in that state's entire recorded history, was started by someone who was trying to signal for help with a fire that got slightly out of hand. A signal fire is supposed to make rescuers come to you, and an uncontrolled wildfire absolutely does bring people running, just not the ones you were hoping for. 15. Eating grass when starving in the wilderness feels like a reasonable last resort because it is green, it is everywhere, and animals eat it constantly, so it must have something useful inside it. Human digestive systems completely lack the enzyme needed to break down grass cellulose, which means chewing and swallowing. It produces 0 calories, 0 nutrition, and a very reliable bout of vomiting that leaves you worse off than before the grass idea occurred to you. Cows have 4 stomachs specifically designed for this job, and humans have 0 of those stomachs, which is a detail this myth has been ignoring for a very long time. 16. Drinking alcohol in cold weather to warm up is one of the most widely believed and most consistently deadly myths in the entire history of cold weather survival across every culture on Earth. Alcohol dilates the blood vessels near the skin surface, which creates a powerful sensation of warmth, while simultaneously pulling heat away from your core organs and accelerating the exact hypothermia you were trying to prevent. Your body is getting colder faster, while your brain is receiving a very convincing, warm, and cozy signal. And that combination has been quietly killing people through winters for centuries. 17. Rubbing frostbitten skin vigorously to warm it up is the instinctive response because rubbing creates friction. Friction creates heat, and heat is exactly what frostbitten tissue needs. So the logic feels completely airtight. Frostbitten tissue is filled with ice crystals at the cellular level, and rubbing it aggressively ruptures those cells in a way that doctors compare to grinding broken glass through living tissue. What started as a bad frostbite situation becomes a permanent tissue damage situation simply because the person trusted their instincts over the counterintuitive reality of what frozen cells actually look like up close. 18. Navigating by which direction water drains in a toilet to figure out which hemisphere you are in is a myth so confidently repeated that people have genuinely paused in wilderness emergencies trying to remember which way their toilet drains at home. The Coriolis effect that supposedly causes this is so weak at the scale of a toilet bowl that manufacturing shape and water entry angle completely override it every single time. Even if this worked perfectly, there are no toilets in the wilderness, and anyone who has made it to a functioning bathroom is already rescued, whether they know it or not. 19. Dead trees make the best firewood because dead means dry, and dry means it burns better. And this logic gets repeated at campsites across America with tremendous confidence every single weekend. Wet dead wood smolders and produces massive amounts of smoke, while hollow-sounding standing dead wood is usually rotten, punky interior that burns about as effectively as damp cardboard and fills the surrounding area with a thick, choking cloud. Generations of campers have spent cold nights desperately blowing on smoldering dead logs, wondering why the fire refuses to cooperate with the advice they were so certain about. 20. Rabbit starvation sounds like something a dramatic survival instructor made up to scare beginners. But it is one of the most thoroughly documented and genuinely terrifying nutritional disasters in wilderness survival history. Eating nothing but ultra-lean wild rabbit meat causes fatal protein poisoning because the liver becomes completely overwhelmed, processing the excess nitrogen load with no dietary fat present to balance it out. Arctic trappers, surrounded by more rabbits than they could ever eat, have literally starved to death because the one food source they had in abundance was systematically destroying their bodies from the inside out. 21. Carrying a knife between your teeth is the universal symbol of wilderness readiness. Every action hero, every survival fantasy, every dramatic movie entrance features this move like it is the pinnacle of outdoor preparedness. In practical reality, you will cut the corners of your mouth on the first awkward movement, drop it in the first water crossing, and discover that it addresses exactly 0 of your actual survival priorities in any real emergency situation. The knife between the teeth is a pure Hollywood aesthetic that somehow escaped the movie screen and convinced real people it was a legitimate survival strategy worth copying. 22. Flies and maggots on food mean it is rotten and dangerous, and any sensible person should throw it out immediately and find something that looks cleaner and more appetizing before eating anything. Botulism, which is one of the most lethal food toxins ever documented, has absolutely no smell, no visible signs, no bugs, and no warning indicators of any kind on the surface of the food it is quietly destroying. People have thrown away visibly buggy food and confidently eaten the smooth, clean, odorless stuff sitting right next to it, and the smooth, clean, odorless stuff was the one that sent them to the hospital. 23. Finding food the moment you are lost in the wilderness is the first survival priority because hunger feels urgent and scary, and your stomach is loudly telling you to fix this problem immediately before anything else. The human body survives 3 full weeks without food, but survives only 3 hours without shelter in genuinely bad weather conditions. And those two numbers could not be further apart in terms of actual urgency. People have wandered away from a tree line that could have saved their lives to go search for berries, while hypothermia was already doing its quiet and efficient work on their core temperature. 24. Banging pots and shouting to scare away bears is reliable universal bear safety advice that gets passed around campsites and trailheads like it applies equally to every bear in every situation across the entire continent. This approach works reasonably well on black bears, but can trigger an immediate defensive charge from a grizzly bear that is protecting cubs, and interprets sudden loud noises as a direct threat rather than a polite request to leave. The problem is that North America has multiple bear species that did not agree to respond the same way, and the advice never bothered to mention which species it was actually written for. 25. Filtering water through your shirt turns dirty water into safe drinking water, and this tip gets shared with such confidence that it sounds like it came from an actual water treatment professional somewhere along the line. Cloth removes visible particles and sediment and absolutely nothing else, meaning Giardia cryptosporidium bacteria and every microscopic pathogen in that water floats straight through the cotton fibers, completely unbothered, and arrives in your mouth right on schedule. The water looks dramatically cleaner after the shirt filter, which is exactly the kind of false reassurance that convinces people they have solved the problem when they have only changed the color of it. 26. Finding food within the first 24 hours of being lost is a survival emergency, because your body needs fuel, and running out of energy before rescue arrives sounds like a genuinely life-threatening countdown. The human body carries enough stored energy to function for 3 weeks without any food intake at all, and the panicked sprint to find berries, roots, and anything edible in the first hour has caused more falls, broken ankles, bad decisions, and navigation disasters than hunger ever has in documented survival cases. Starvation is a very slow process, and the anxiety about starvation is a very fast one, and survival statistics consistently show which one actually kills people first. 27. A compass always points to true north, and if you follow it, you will walk in a perfectly accurate direction toward wherever you are trying to go, which sounds like exactly what a compass is designed to do. Compasses point to magnetic north, which is currently located over 500 miles away from geographic true north, and that gap creates navigation errors that compound dramatically over distance, sending confident hikers miles off their intended course. Every map is drawn around true north, and every compass points somewhere meaningfully different, and the people who never learned about magnetic declination have been donating themselves to search and rescue statistics for generations. 28. Staying put when you are lost is always the right call because rescuers will find you eventually, and moving around only makes you harder to locate, which sounds like responsible patient survival thinking. This advice only works if someone actually knows you are missing and has a general idea of where you are going, and if neither of those conditions exist, then staying put is just a slower and lonelier version of the same problem. Hikers who told nobody their plans and then stayed put, waiting for rescue that was never coming, have converted what should have been a rescue operation into something much harder to watch. 29. Avoiding red berries in the wild is the color-coded survival rule that sounds foolproof because everyone knows red means danger, and this simple system should make berry identification easy enough for anyone to follow confidently. Wild strawberries are red and completely safe. Baneberries come in both red and white, and both varieties are toxic. Yew berries are bright red and extremely dangerous, and the entire color-based system falls apart the moment you look at an actual forest with actual berries growing in it. Color tells you almost nothing meaningful about berry toxicity, and the false confidence this rule creates has sent people straight to the exact berries it was supposedly protecting them from. 30. Running through unbroken spider webs across a trail means no large animals have passed that way recently, so the path ahead is predator-free and safe to walk through without concern, which sounds like clever nature reading. Animals walk through spider webs constantly and completely, and spiders rebuild their webs within hours, regardless of what destroyed the last one, making this observation statistically meaningless as a safety indicator in any direction. This myth has no logical foundation of any kind, and yet it circulates through hiking communities with enough confidence that people have genuinely relaxed their guard in dangerous terrain because a spider web was intact. 31. Hot smoke from a campfire keeps mosquitoes and bugs away, so sealing yourself inside a tent with a small fire or sitting directly in the smoke stream is the ultimate natural bug repellent solution that costs nothing. Smoke in an enclosed space produces carbon monoxide, which is colorless, odorless, and begins affecting your brain and body long before you realize anything is wrong with the situation. This myth trades a mosquito problem for a poisoning problem, and the mosquitoes were genuinely the lesser of those two options the entire time. 32. High-altitude sickness only hits unfit and out-of-shape people. So if you train hard, stay active, and keep yourself in excellent physical condition, the mountain basically owes you a safe passage to the top. Altitude sickness is caused purely by reduced oxygen availability, which affects every human body, regardless of fitness level, and elite Olympic athletes and professional mountaineers have been evacuated from high peaks with full cerebral edema after dismissing early symptoms as normal tiredness. The mountain does not check your gym membership before deciding whether to give you a headache. 33. Cooking wild mushrooms thoroughly before eating them destroys any toxins present because heat breaks down dangerous compounds, and a fully cooked mushroom that was properly prepared should be completely safe to eat with confidence. Amatoxins found in death cap mushrooms are completely heat-stable, meaning boiling, frying, roasting, or any other cooking method you apply does absolutely nothing to reduce their lethality by even a single %. The mushroom arrives at your table, looking perfectly cooked, smelling wonderful, and carrying the exact same toxin load it had when it was sitting in the forest. 34. Carrying a gun in the wilderness solves most dangerous animal encounters because a firearm is the ultimate force equalizer, and anything threatening that approaches you is going to lose that confrontation immediately. Bear spray has been documented as 3 times more effective than firearms in actual bear encounters, and people who drew guns on charging bears in real recorded incidents had significantly worse outcomes than those who deployed spray calmly. The National Park Service studied this extensively, and the results were uncomfortable for everyone who packed a gun, specifically because it felt safer than a can of pepper spray. 35. Any vine you find in the forest can be twisted into usable rope because vines are nature's cordage, and this is exactly the kind of resourceful thinking that real wilderness survival requires when you need to build or secure something. Poison ivy is a vine, Virginia creeper is a vine, and contact poisoning cases from people weaving what they thought was natural survival rope are a fully documented category of wilderness injury that emergency room staff have described as both tragic and extremely difficult to explain with a straight face. Nature stocks its rope supply right next to its medical emergency supply on purpose, apparently. 36. A solar still dug into desert ground will produce enough water to keep you hydrated and alive, which is why it appears in every survival manual, every wilderness course, and every desert survival conversation as a legitimate, life-saving technique. A properly built textbook, solar still produces approximately 1 cup of water per day under ideal conditions, while the physical effort of digging and building it in desert heat costs you several times that amount in sweat before you collect a single drop. It is an excellent answer on a wilderness survival exam and a genuinely terrible strategy for an actual desert emergency. 37. Animals instinctively know which plants are medicinal and safe. So watching what they eat and following their dietary choices is a reliable natural guide to finding safe food sources in any wilderness environment. And deer eat yew, which is toxic to humans. Birds consume pokeweed berries that cause severe human poisoning, and animals regularly eat dozens of plants that would hospitalize or kill a person because their biology processes these compounds in entirely different ways. Following an animal's menu in the wild is one of the most confidently documented paths straight to a poisoning that nobody saw coming. 38. Dry leaves make excellent emergency firewood because they are everywhere, they are completely dry, and they catch flame instantly, which seems like exactly what you need when you are cold and need a fire started quickly. Dry leaves burn explosively for about 4 seconds, produce almost no sustained heat, and throw burning embers up to 10 feet in every direction, which is why fire investigators consistently find this particular survival fire at the origin point of accidental wildfires. One moment you are warming your hands, and the next moment you have created an emergency significantly larger than the one you were trying to solve. 39. Following your gut instinct when lost in unfamiliar wilderness terrain is natural, reliable, and trustworthy because human intuition is powerful, and your instincts exist specifically to keep you alive in dangerous situations. Gut instinct in wilderness terrain is pattern matched entirely to the suburban and urban environments where you have spent your entire life, and studies on lost hikers consistently show that instinct reliably points people in the wrong direction in forests and mountains. Your gut is extremely experienced at navigating grocery stores, parking lots, and neighborhood streets, and has approximately zero useful data about which way is out of a forest. 40. Holding your fingers between the sun and the horizon to estimate remaining daylight is a reliable universal technique where each finger represents roughly 15 minutes, giving you an accurate countdown to sunset wherever you are. This estimate only holds at specific latitudes during specific times of year and near the equator, or during certain seasons. The calculation becomes wildly inaccurate in ways that are not obvious until you are suddenly standing in complete darkness. Confident four-finger predictions have left hikers completely surprised by nightfall in terrain they were certain they had enough light to navigate safely. 41. Survival is mostly about physical toughness, and the biggest, strongest, most athletically capable person in any group is automatically the most likely to make it out alive because raw physical power solves wilderness problems. Would every professional survival instructor and every documented survival case study ranks mental discipline and calm decision-making dramatically above physical strength as the determining factor in who actually survives? Smaller, quieter, calmer individuals have outlasted bigger, stronger ones, repeatedly in documented cases, purely because their brain stayed organized while everyone else's fell apart under pressure. 42. River crossings are completely safe as long as the water looks shallow and calm, because slow-moving, clear water that barely reaches your knees does not look remotely threatening enough to justify serious concern. Fast-moving water at knee depth exerts hundreds of pounds of lateral force against your legs, and the smooth, glassy surface of a river tells you absolutely nothing about the current strength running beneath it. The most dangerous crossings in wilderness rescue history have consistently been the ones that looked the most harmless from the bank before someone stepped in. 43. Sleeping directly on the ground is completely natural and fine because humans lived on the ground for thousands of years, and the earth beneath you is solid, stable, and connected to nature in a very primal, satisfying way. Ground conducts heat away from your body up to 25 times faster than still air, meaning sleeping without insulation beneath you, is one of the most reliable and efficient routes to hypothermia available in the outdoors. The earth is not your friend at night in cold conditions. It is a heat thief that works slowly, quietly, and continuously until you wake up dangerously cold or do not wake up at all. 44. One high-protein energy bar is solid fuel for a full day of serious hiking because it is dense, it is nutritious, and the packaging makes it sound like it contains everything a hard-working body needs to perform at altitude. A single bar contains roughly 200 to 300 calories, while a full day of hiking at elevation burns between 4,000 and 6,000 calories, leaving a gap so enormous it is almost impressive. Rangers describe rescuing calorie-bonked hikers who genuinely believed one bar was a complete nutritional strategy and are now sitting on a rock unable to take another step with an empty wrapper as their only explanation. 45. Getting lost in the woods is rare, because trails are clearly marked, obviously maintained, and simple enough to follow that only genuinely careless or unprepared people end up needing search and rescue assistance in the first place. The United States Forest Service responds to tens of thousands of search and rescue calls every single year from hikers on marked trails that disappeared at stream crossings, blew down in storms, or forked without any signage to indicate which direction led somewhere useful. The most common demographic in search and rescue statistics is the confident hiker with no map who is absolutely certain the trail was going to stay obvious the entire way. 46. Then using your phone as a compass without cell signal still works perfectly because the Compass app runs independently of network connection, and your phone is a sophisticated piece of technology that should handle basic directional guidance without any trouble. Compass apps depend on a magnetometer sensor that varies dramatically in quality and calibration between devices, and multiple hikers have navigated with complete confidence using phones pointing them 40 to 60 degrees off their actual bearing due to sensors that were never properly calibrated. The phone looked authoritative, it showed a needle. It pointed somewhere and it was wrong the entire time in a way that only became obvious miles later. 47. Boiling water for 1 minute kills everything dangerous inside it, and this rule works reliably at any campsite, any trail, and any elevation, because boiling is boiling, and water that has reached a rolling boil is safe to drink. Water boils at only 194 degrees Fahrenheit at 10,000 feet elevation instead of the standard 212 degrees, and that lower temperature is not sufficient to eliminate all pathogens reliably in 60 seconds. High-altitude campers who followed the 1-minute rule with complete confidence have collected giardia from water they were absolutely certain they had made safe. 48. Wild animals only attack humans when provoked, threatened, or cornered because nature operates on a logical system where unprovoked aggression from animals toward calm, non-threatening humans simply does not happen under normal circumstances. Predatory black bears, cougars, and coyotes have attacked campers who were sleeping, cooking, or simply walking through terrain minding their own business without any provocation of any kind whatsoever. The animal did not receive the memo explaining that attacks are only supposed to happen after a clear provocation, and wildlife rangers hear the phrase "I did not provoke it" with a frequency that has stopped surprising them entirely. 49. Sunscreen is only necessary on bright, sunny days outdoors, because clouds block the sun, and an overcast sky means reduced UV exposure and no real risk of burning for anyone spending time outside in cool, cloudy weather. UV radiation penetrates cloud cover at up to 80% of its full intensity, and snow reflects an additional 80% of that radiation back upward directly at your face from below, creating a situation where you are being hit from two directions simultaneously. Wilderness rescues have involved hikers completely incapacitated by severe sunburn and corneal damage on days that looked so gray and harmless that leaving the sunscreen behind felt like the obvious and reasonable decision. So there you have it. 49 survival myths that have been confidently passed around campfires hiking trails. Sazan YouTube comment sections for decades by people who were absolutely certain they knew exactly what they were doing. Nature has been out here running the world's most patient correction program, and humans keep failing the same test with remarkable consistency. If this video saved you from peeing on a jellyfish or drinking cactus juice, do humanity a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to BrainFumble, and turn on notifications before your next hiking trip. And drop a comment below telling us which one of these myths you actually believed before today.